Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute. We appreciate you joining. Wanted to give everybody a chance to dial in, and I see the numbers slowly but surely climbing up. We'll give it another 60 seconds and go ahead and get started. And again, thanks so much for joining us today. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I know time will be running shortly. Again, thanks everybody for joining today. We really appreciate it. We have what we think is a really exciting topic on hand for everyone. We're going to be discussing, and the title is "The Internet Includes Everyone," right? No matter the challenges. And I think we've all, throughout the last, call it 3 or 4 years, experienced a wide array of challenges, some relating to this topic and some just life affecting in general. One thing I wanted to start off the call with is I wanted to make sure we all had sort of our North Star, right? Where are we going to be pointing in this conversation? And the one thing I'd like you all to ask yourselves in the back of your mind as we go on through an exciting panel here is, what would any of us do without the internet, right? I mean, I think we'd all agree that this is a vital tool today, much like what we would categorize, I think, electricity back in the 1920s, right? An indispensable um, tool for a productive life, whether that be from all elements of education, in through employment, from finance and insurance, whether it be the small to medium-sized business owner, or all the way up into sort of the infrastructure who help to support the global infrastructure in the carrier community. I think we all realize and admit that that internet is really indispensable to us in our growth. Um, we all need it, but unfortunately, we don't all have it. And so that's one of the things that we want to talk about here with a really dynamic cast of individuals. And so let's go ahead and get into the introduction on who we're talking to today. And so for brevity of time, I'll go ahead and make the introductions. I'll read a little bit about their background, and then we can get into some pretty pervasive questions about the topic and helping us all understand better how to service one another as a community. So first off, I'll start with Mark Allen. Mark is the program manager for Government Stimulus Program, and he's responsible for the implementation of Zayo's strategy in support of the internet for all. His efforts resulted in Zayo being the only national carrier to receive NTIA funding for middle mile construction this past June. This funding is key for Zayo, and we always work to close the digital divide and boost the middle mile construction that offers our very important ISP customers new opportunities. Next up, we have Xavier Duche, who is probably has the broadest view when it comes to ISP concerns, from a technical perspective, that is. Xavier leads Zayo's solutions engineering team focused on the carrier community specifically. So he's near and dear to my heart. And his team really are the boots on the ground where our carrier customers connect into Zayo's network. I'd say safely that Xavier's seen it all, and his perspective is both valuable and invaluable as our ISPs learn how to actually navigate this world and choose the right carrier partner and the right carrier path. Next up, Noah Haggerty. Noah's here because we all realize that we can't build this ourselves, right? And so Noah leads the IP product team. This includes our dedicated internet access product, DIA, affectionately known, as well as our IP transit services. Zayo's tier 1 ISP status puts us at the top in a top 10 ranking in CADA. Most recently, we were number 7. Next up, we have our guest of honor, Freedom Kikar, who is the CTO of Peak Internet. Peak has recently tackled exactly the type of topics that we're going to be discussing on this webinar, providing their rural community, no matter how remote, which we all know is an extreme challenge, with high-speed, high-performance broadband connections. Peak did this in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and they secured the funding, working with both state and local entities to secure that win. They are actually sitting right now where I think at one point where many of you are sitting right now, We want to hear a lot more from Freedom as far as how they actually accomplished that and got that win. And then finally, I have the unique ability to and presence to be able to sit here and moderate these fine folks. My name is Nias Battle, and I am the Vice President of Carrier, Wholesale, and Infrastructure globally here at Zayo. And I've been in the carrier space for, I'd say, probably 2/3 of my 30-year career in the industry. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to share some time with these fine folks today. So a couple of housekeeping issues. Bottom of the screen, there are two buttons. The chat button, which will be disabled, so don't bother to click on that. The Q&A button is where you will communicate with us and with each other. Your questions come straight to the panelists on the call. If we don't get to all the questions, which we're going to do our very best to do so, we'll send out written answers to everyone following the conclusion of the call. We have budgeted about 45 minutes for this session. But we are willing to stay for the full hour if needed. There are over 45 and counting people here with us today. You've all been muted, so you don't have to worry about any dogs in the background or any trash collection or the new furniture delivery that's scheduled for the day, right? So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. The internet includes everyone, no matter the challenges. First off, I want to start with exactly that, right? The challenges. Rural communities are often remote. This offers a number of challenges that we in this carrier community and user community need to overcome. I want to start with Xavier. Xavier, are there any building or rural network challenges to speak of that you'd like to share with us? Things that have come up as you've kind of gone to battle, warring with us in the carrier community to service our customers.
Thanks, Nice. So yeah, I mean, there's obviously challenges building in rural areas, but one thing that I wanted to highlight is first that oftentimes that Zayo has to build in rural areas. It's via our long haul dark fiber routes. But one thing I wanted to really highlight first is that Zayo is at its core a network infrastructure and a construction company. We have OSP teams that build miles and miles of fiber every day across North America in cities, suburbs, and rural areas. Over the last 16 years since Zayo was created, we've pretty much done it all and have the ability, experience, and expertise to build pretty much anywhere. But with that said, some areas can present more challenges, either because of permitting or easement with communities or local authorities, because of remote access to the site that we need to build to, or difficult terrain to build in. So these are our typical challenges, but generally Zayo has overcome that very successfully and will continue to do so.
Yeah, no, thanks, Xavier. I would definitely agree, and I think we all live that, right? I think reaching everyone is extremely critical. It's crucial. But there's never been a business case in the 30 years that I've been doing this that could justify, a 5, 10, 15-mile build in order to reach out and grab 1, 2, or 3 customers that we know we've seen in these types of situations from a remote build perspective. So with that, there are funding challenges, I think it's safe to say. And, Mark, can you help us by discussing some of the challenges of obtaining the extremely valuable yet somewhat elusive NTIA grant funding?
Yeah, no, thank you. Excited to be here. So the first thing I would want to do is echo Xavier's point of the transition from deploying long haul routes via dark fiber to now thinking about applying those principles to deploying middle mile architecture in support of the NTIA's intent, which is internet for all. And so Zayo's challenge, I think, in the first few applications was how do we, as a long haul construction and maintenance company, leverage our assets and our people to deploy middle mile. And the architecture looks different in that long haul is typically like a toll road, to use an analogy, in that you're going from one metro area to another, and you got to pay some money to get on that road. What's different with the middle mile architecture is that it's more of a state freeway system. in that there are exit ramps. So along the way, that data, or in the analogy, those cars, can exit into those communities and service those communities. So when applying to the NTIA grants, all those elements flow down into budgeting, construction, design, of really shifting our focus from a long haul to middle mile. And of course, that only applies to where the NTI grants are applicable, not our entire network. And then the second challenge too, if I could squeeze this in, would
No,
be
please.
understanding the intent of the program itself and using certain criteria to determine where we feel Zayo is most competitive to apply for these grant applications. And we use a lot of different needs-based criteria and socioeconomic data points to determine where we feel our efforts to build middle mile would have the most impact in those communities. So some of the things we looked at was current broadband speeds, of course, rurality, so how far away they are from highway systems. That's actually a pretty good indicator for broadband connectivity. And then also socioeconomic indicators like enrollments in the Affordable Connectivity Program, known as ACP. And then also things like school lunch program. How many schools within a county are participating in those school lunch programs as an indicator for need.
No, that's great. I mean, I absolutely, Mark. Those are some creative ways to look at things that I'm sure a lot of folks really hadn't considered, right? And they're uniquely aligned and daisy linked together. With that, I think we've done a good job in kind of discussing from a macro perspective. And what I'd like to do is to kind of dig a little bit deeper now. And Preetam, what I'd like to ask you is maybe to discuss some of the challenges of connecting rural farmland, some of the foothills or canyons that are bordered by mountains. Why were the internet speeds so slow in Willamette County, in the Willamette Valley, I should say?
So the biggest challenge, as you all are aware, is the infrastructure cost to build here, right? When you're talking about building in the rural areas, you may have a house or two in a mile. To really get that rate of investment back or return, there is no direct way to do that. So the infrastructure challenge are the physical barriers which comes with the hills and the mountains and the terrains over here is the biggest challenge for any local ISP. And you can only get that done by grants of fund, which are available right now or in the past. Again, the permitting, the right of way are the other challenges which comes with it. But the biggest one I can say is the infrastructure cost to build a sustainable, good network in this area. Like the other question that you have is why the speeds are slow. It can be because of, again, the infrastructure on how that is currently built on, or also using the legacy systems in place that really creates a big barrier to offer higher speeds. And if you don't upgrade those, or if you don't look at into something better to provide those higher end services, I think you're going to see that across the board going forward as well.
Great. No, thanks. And I think we have a really great video that captures some informed stakeholders and actually feet on the ground for Peak that address exactly the things that you were speaking about right there, Preetam.
We live in a beautiful area of the state. We've got trees, we've got valleys.
There's a lot of outdoor recreation around here with lakes and rivers.
It's just a nice, quiet, peaceful place to live. We love living here.
It's kind of a close-knit, smaller community, and it has kind of a hometown atmosphere.
At Peak, our vision is empowering people and improving quality of life, and that's what we strive to do every day. Our business is built on trust. Our customers are our friends, they're our neighbors.
It's kind of a personalized support that you don't get from some of the larger internet service providers.
We serve very rural markets. With our terrain and the mountains and the valleys, really wireless or satellite signals are just not possible in those areas.
When we're going out prospecting, trying to find out areas that we want to build fiber in, I get a lot of response from people that their internet service is completely inadequate for doing most of the daily things that most of us take for granted.
We were so excited when we could get internet service out here. Thought it was going to be the greatest thing since Cracker Jacks, but half the time it did not work.
We live in what's called a bandwidth exhaustion area. We would get like dial-up speed, even though we're paying for DSL.
A lot of these people in rural communities are getting left behind.
My husband saw an article about how CPI was partnering with Peak to get internet to some of these far-reaching areas in Eastland County. So my husband is like super happy. It's coming, like we're gonna have good, blazing fast internet.
Fiber is a really important part of service to our members, but also for the operation of the electric utility too.
Peak's relationship with CPI initially started with working directly with them to get connectivity to their substations.
Substations are the biggest asset utilities manage. Fiber to the substations gives us real-time analysis of the system and how it's performing. And our partnership with Peak has allowed us to have really good control over our system.
Just like our electric cooperative parent, our goal is to build a future-proof network. Fiber is crucial.
Fiber is not affected by the weather. Fiber is stable and it's safe.
There is no limitation with fiber. It opens unlimited options or services that we can do. If something new comes tomorrow, we are ready for that.
We are rolling out a state-of-the-art future-proof network to rural America. We serve 5,000 of our rural homes in our service area with high-speed gigabit broadband services. We have rural homes in mountainous valleys and canyons that have better service in their home than people do in a metropolitan area. The financial assistance that we received from USDA was essential for us to build into our rural markets. With the lack of density that we have in our markets, there is not a viable business case that you can take to a bank to borrow the money to serve these areas.
Our nearest neighbor is about a quarter mile away, and we're all in this rural area, and everybody struggles with internet.
Out in a lot of those areas, there's such a low home count per mile.
When you talk about a 1 mile build, you may only get 2 or 3 residents in some of the areas.
This funding is critical for us. With the Reconnect program, we've made a larger dent in serving our rural constituents.
Without that grant money, we wouldn't be getting good internet.
We're very fortunate to be part of the program where the fiber service was brought in. The connectivity has increased exponentially. It's allowed us to be able to have the services that we need for our home and our family.
It really does work good, and it's good to have it working.
There's more work to be done and more homes to be served, and future Reconnect programs will help us do that. This really enables us to close the digital divide and to serve those rural customers.
It's more than just a job. It's a way of life. It's a philosophy. Trying to make the world a better place, to help make life better for the rural communities that we serve. That's a very powerful thing.
Thanks very much for that, Taylor. I mean, I think we all could learn a lot from what we just heard. We started at a high level, right, and have drilled down into various components of the need here for bridging some of this digital divide. Pritam, I wanted to come back to you and talk about, can you share with us some of the trends that you see that are driving this need, right? We've seen an explosion in IP consumerism, everything from people's refrigerators on down. And so it'd be interesting to understand from your perspective as someone who is a provider that's reaching out and actually changing the lives of the folks that are working in your and living in your communities. What have you seen as far as some of the trends that are driving the need for widespread access and a clearer reach each day?
Yeah, before everyone learned from COVID, what COVID brought to the table, right, is like the need of work from home. I think that was the biggest thing that put everything into focus at that point. I think the work-life balance going forward, like people from the big metropolitan, they don't want to sit in the traffic. If they can work remotely with higher fiber speeds or internet, I think that's what they are looking for. Telemedicine is the other way, other thing that is driving this. A lot of things we talk about internet, but nowadays it's a necessity. I don't think it's an option anymore, right? Because everything just runs behind it, whether it's IoT, everything you'll touch. You even have coffee mugs now that can be controlled by IoT, right? Your smart mugs and whatnot. This is just starting. So refrigerators, washing machine, everything. I think AI is also the factor behind all of this too, but I don't see there's anything in the future that can't be uh, working without an internet too. So I think that's where we need to focus on providing a very reliable internet solutions to our customers, our members that we are serving.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I think that ties right into a little bit more I wanted to talk, and I wanted to swing over to Noah, and maybe Noah, you could share a little bit. I'll throw you a softball to get things started. Maybe just describe a little bit about Zayo's IP transit service.
Yeah, thank you, Nias. Also great to be here and just appreciate all of your guys' attendance and questions that are coming in. So Zayo's IP service, is ultimately a dedicated, reliable, and symmetrical internet connection that ties back to our top-ranked Tier 1 network. So typically, consumers of this service are, large carriers, content providers, and other large enterprises that are looking to access Zayo's customer, business-to-business customer relationships and our peering interconnections that we have with other Tier 1s, other hyperscalers that ultimately allow us to reach the global internet table through all of these relationships, right? The school of thought being, if we can't reach it directly on our network, that we have the interconnections in place to hand off that traffic to a peer that has that relationship. And so we, as a Tier 1, we definitely pride ourselves in that, continued growth and interconnections and overall peering capacity across our network. Back to Pridham's comment, right, of just the general bandwidth demand growth. Since about 2019, 2020, the US and Canada specifically has been growing at a 25% CAGR in terms of total internet capacity. So back in 2019, we were sitting at around 101 terabits per second. Flash forward to 2023, we were sitting at around 250 terabits per second. And that is it's an insane amount of internet traffic to fathom. But Zayo amongst many other carriers are kind of integral in handling those mass traffic exchanges. So kind of derailed a little bit from the
No, that's perfect
question, but yeah.
So let me ask you this as a follow-up. So what benefits would our either carrier customers or enterprise customers have in utilizing Zayo's IP transit for service by comparison?
Yeah, so I kind of alluded to it in the prior answer. As a Tier 1, there's that inherent benefit to the product itself and to that status, right? If you think about how the internet is made up, it's a network of networks. So you have Tier 1s at the top as the upstream providers that are interconnected with the other Tier 1 ISPs, and that is all cascaded down to Tier 2 or Tier 3 ISPs that are ultimately providing that end connection to users. And so with the peering and customer relationships that Zayo has, we have such a strong geographic distribution that it allows for that seamless experience, in any of these given markets that are in question. And back to our peering relationships, as I mentioned, if we don't have the capability to deliver directly on Zayo's backbone, we are able to leverage those peering relationships and have a seamless experience with handing off that traffic to to one of our peers. And so the other thing I would say, a differentiator with Zayo specifically, is kind of our backbone management tactics. We're one of the few carriers, if not the only, that we run at no more than 50% utilization across our backbone. So we're not running a hot IP or a hot network, which ensures that there's a better customer experience, right? There's lower latency, less jitter, as a direct byproduct of that. And if there were to be any fiber cuts or anything of that nature, we would have the ability to divert 100% of that traffic to the nearest point of presence, just given those management tactics. So I would say that those are a couple of the things that other customers could benefit from our service, or how other customers could benefit from our service. So yeah.
No, great. Thanks so much for that, Noah. I think maybe it'd be a good time for us to take a couple of questions, break the kind of chain we've had here a little bit. First question that came in, and maybe this one will go to Mark, but anyone feel free to jump in, whether it be Preetam or Xavier or Noah for that matter. But the first question comes in from Vinay Khanna. Does it still make sense to build fiber to outlying remote areas versus using LEO satellite 5G, 6G service with tie-ins to fiber at key locations? Really great question. Mark, want to give a stab at that?
Yeah, that was a good question. I can answer that from a government funding standpoint, and I'm sure other folks here can answer it from a technology standpoint. But from a government funding point of view, for BEAD funding, it's a very much fiber first approach. So like Pitram had said, we can enable much more technology and use cases through fiber than we could typically through fixed wireless access or 5G applications. So in certain areas that are defined by the NTIA as high cost zones, there is an approach to use less reliable technology such as unlicensed and soft licensed fixed wireless access to serve those customers. But we expect that to be secondary to deploying fiber directly to those underserved and remote communities.
No, great. Thanks so much. Why don't we do
just to
another one?
add, nice.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
from a technology standpoint, there is a reliability issue potentially with LEO satellites that would be probably second to a fiber network. So I think that's a consideration you want to keep in mind as well, the reliability of the service.
Yeah, and I second that. I think reliability is the prime factor, right? Yes, definitely reaching out to those areas without a good funding or grant or anything is a challenge, because those are so out. There will be few applications that you have to rely on those. But if you're really looking for a reliable solution, then I don't think that will be a case for. So depending on the application and what the service you're looking for, I think that goes back whether which technology you want to use, whether fiber or satellite or anything else.
No, it makes perfect sense. And we here at Zayo, being a fiber-based company, we are big prescribers to that methodology and that line of thinking, right? Why don't we take one more question? And there are a number that come in here, but I want to jump back in and make sure we don't miss any of the content. And then I promise we'll circle back to some of these questions. Jacob Poe had a good question here that I think is pretty straightforward. And it's, how would someone join to help build these broadband and middle mile projects to help build these markets? So Mark, you want to jump in that, and maybe I'll follow back over the top as well.
Sure, thank you. So we'll introduce it a little later in the call, but there is a program that Zayo has developed in support of the NTIA's intent of Internet for All. And what that leverages is Zayo's long haul and middle mile expertise with the local and rural carriers' expertise in delivering fiber to the home, as well as really knowing the needs assessment for that community. So to answer your question directly, I would say you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and we can share more about how Zayo is thinking partnering with other ISPs to deploy BEAD grants.
No, absolutely. And the program that Mark is referencing is a program that his team works hand in hand with my team. And so, from a carrier, wholesale, and infrastructure vertical here at Zayo, we look to partner with Mark and to partner down into the local markets to do exactly what he said, right? So we have the expertise and the network from a middle mile as well as a long haul perspective. In a lot of cases, we have a really great metro market presence as well. But a lot of these NTIA funded, as we're talking here, are remote in nature, which would then put a little stress on some of the assets that we have, either from a legacy perspective or a build on our own. We'd be happy to work with you locally and have been very successful across the board in some specific markets already with this undertaking. So great question and right down the fairway for exactly the type of initiatives that we are putting in place here at Zayo to partner with you locally in your markets.
Yes, can I add some more to it?
Freedom,
So
please.
that's how the partnership between Peak and Zayo happened too. So right, as I said, it's the local ISPs like us, we can only do so much, but we in the end we have to go out to the world. So we have to get transit, and that's where the partnership between Zayo and Peak happened, because to provide a reliable service, we also need to make sure that we provide them at a very cost-effective rate. And I think working with Zayo help us achieve that, because in the end, we just want to make sure we price is a factor, right? So our customers get the best for the value as well. So I think working with Zayo in the past and coming up with a solution on where we can hand off our traffic to them and they can take it from the transit perspective help really reduce our cost to our end customer as well.
Outstanding. Fantastic. Jumping back in, I'll say ISPs are employing various strategies to ensure equitable access to reliable internet connection for their communities. Pritam, I'd like to lean on you a little bit more to discuss some of the actual strategies that you've employed, not just with Zayo, but overall, right? Some examples that you might be comfortable giving us on how you've gone about accomplishing this.
Sure. I think the biggest key for anyone here is partnership, right? Your partnership with your local entities, your state, your city officials. The other biggest thing is like we are owned by electric co-op. So CPI, which is our parent company, we work with them on doing the aerial construction that really helps us out, even putting the conduits and other things. That working and partnering with your local entities or any other builders or construction companies who are already working on the roadways or whatnot, that will help save you tremendous cost. I think the partnership is the key. Also, some of the grants that you are seeing, you need some kind of a partner to go in to apply for those grants as well. So whether there's a public partnership, is a local, is a public-private partnership, I think partnership is the key word in this scenario to achieve what we are looking for. I will definitely say from a local ISP perspective, working with the cities and the towns we are in, working with the schools really helps to gain that momentum going forward.
No, outstanding. Appreciate that. Xavier, rounding back to you and Noah, maybe from a jump in as well, specifically for fiber connectivity, can you give us a little insight into what type of partners we look for, or what type of partner makes a good partner for Zayo in these types of situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think partnership goes both ways. One thing that local ISPs are probably looking for is a partner that has an open access network. One thing that is very important to clarify is that Zayo is not here to compete with these local ISPs in that business, serving rural areas and underserved communities. Zayo is strictly focused on providing network infrastructure for that middle mile. So there's no conflict of interest here. We're here to enable these local ISPs to serve their end customers. The other point too on that is that I'll let Mark correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think as part of our NTIA grant, and the grant we've received, we will be providing a price equality for like services to any of these local ISPs. We're not going to pressure one customer for a certain price and another one with a lesser price, or I think there will be price parity, price equality there, which is an important factor to keep in mind. But want to continue on to talking about the network being a key point of partnership. in the past, Zayo didn't really have the proper architecture for facilitating access off of our long-haul dark fiber routes. Delivering a service along these long-haul dark fiber routes represented a significant investment for Zayo because we needed to deploy infrastructure to enable these services. As additional opportunities were very scarce for other customers tapping into the long-haul dark fiber in rural areas, there was no business case justifying Zayo to develop this infrastructure. And in turn, we were passing on that high cost to that end customer's service. So that price point was prohibitive for any customers to use Zayo in our traditional, long-haul dark fiber routes the way they were architected. Moving forward with the NTIA grant that Zayo received funding on, and those are 3 routes that we'll cover in a few minutes. But what it's enabling Zayo to do is bring our network capabilities, both for transport, DWDM, and packet services, including internet. It's bringing our network capabilities at each of the ILAs along those long-haul dark fiber routes, providing that that capability that Zayo is used to providing at the local edge of those rural areas. So that's really an important point to keep in mind when you're picking your partner or looking to partner with the middle mile provider like Zayo. And the last thing I wanted to touch on was how to work together between the local ISP and Zayo. I think the number one thing is planning for day one, knowing where your network will physically meet Zayo's network. And that's obviously a conversation to have together, but who is also responsible to build the fiber all the way to Zayo's access point. Typically, we will ask that the local ISP builds to Zayo, but we can be creative and entertain circumstances where we flip that around as well. And then lastly, the services and bandwidths that you need are also great things to plan for day one. And then, down the road, some future needs that you may have in expanding your network, providing diverse access point into the Zayo network, or scaling up with adding circuits or increasing bandwidth. So these are the things that you should be looking for in partnering with your middle mile provider, and I think those are things that's able to really great on that front.
No, thanks, Xavier. I mean, I think that's on all the points that I had here from a notes perspective. I appreciate that. I think now it's really a great time to kind of transition into some parts of meet. And I know folks are chomping at the bit to try to hear Mark explain a little bit more about our NTIA involvement and successes. And why don't we first, Mark? Why don't we, just so we're all on the same page, what is middle mile?
I can describe it, but I'm going to steal someone's quote. So Alan Davidson, he is the assistant director of the NTIA. He described the middle mile as being a catalyst to deploy last mile services. And really what that means is these communities, they can't live in an island. I forget the word that they used to describe it in the video, but these are essentially broadband islands that require backhaul and diverse connectivity.
I think the term was bandwidth exhausted.
Yes. And the middle mile enables these communities to go back to an internet pop and receive those services, whether it be different applications or just broadband connectivity. So middle mile is key to enabling last mile.
Outstanding. No, we appreciate that. Well, I know you have a couple of slides here that we're all anxiously waiting to hear you take us through. And so with that, Mr. Allen, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, thank you. So this is generally how Zayo's thinking about the multi-phase approach to achieving internet for all. And we'll start with the first phase being at the state level. A lot of these programs came after the COVID epidemic. And for instance, the state capital project funds is around $10 billion in treasury funds that's allocated not only to broadband, but to enabling services around work, education, healthcare. So broadband is a key component of that, whether it be connecting government offices, connecting hospitals, or schools. COVID fiscal relief, which a lot of people on this call might refer to as ARPA funding, is a larger bucket of money, or sorry, smaller, at around $350 billion, which again has a similar intent, which is to be a response and recovery to the COVID epidemic. Finally, the tribal broadband and connecting minority communities are worth mentioning because, for instance, the tribal broadband, it encompasses more than just broadband connectivity. It also includes some of the other pillars of digital equity, which one is connectivity. So you have to have internet at your home or residence or business. Number two of those pillars would be the actual device. So you have internet at your home, now you need a device to connect to it. And then the final pillar is digital literacy. So that combines all these elements so that residents are able to understand how to connect to their Wi-Fi, but also use services that I think a lot of us take for granted, such as email or online billing, online banking. And with those three pillars of digital equity, that's really how we push this forward to allow internet for all. So moving on to phase two, which is really exciting. Zayo was the only national provider to be awarded an NTI grant, of which we were awarded 3, which came out to be roughly 10% of the $1 billion allocated for this program. And I already did my plug on Alan Davidson's quote, which is really describing Middle Mile as a force multiplier for connecting communities nationwide. And I'll get into more of that later. But finally, the phase 3, which is state and national, largely includes the BEAD program. The BEAD program came out of the Biden administration's Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which allocates funds to states so that they can develop and plan their own strategy for internet for all within their own communities. A lot of those states right now are within the version 1 or 2 of their BEAD planning and have already been allocated a funding amount, but those actual funding opportunities we anticipate to come out sometime quarter 1 or 2 of next year. So a lot more to come on BEAD. A lot of ISPs are still wrapping their head around a lot of the requirements and intent, but it's very exciting. And if you could change slides, please. So this slide highlights the 3 NTIA awards that Zayo was honored to partner with the NTIA on. Starting on the left here, Umatilla, Reno. Umatilla is a small town in between the Washington and Oregon border, and my team actually had the privilege to go out there and meet with Senator Ron Wyden and many of the other community members to discuss some of their challenges of internet connectivity and participating in a digital economy like we have today. We were also able to actually drive down from Umatilla to Bend, which really for me provided a really concrete or displayed a concrete need for internet connectivity throughout Eastern Oregon. And this route will be completed in Reno. The Dallas to Atlanta route is actually a route that Zayo has already constructed, and the NTI funds will be used to retrofit that network with the rural access network that Xavier has been describing. Dallas to Atlanta is interesting. If you look at just those 5 states of Texas, Louisiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Georgia, those 5 states encompass around 20% of the ACP participants throughout the US. So earlier when I was talking about how did we develop an understanding of where the highest need was, the Affordable Connectivity Program is a government subsidized program for residents to pay for their broadband at home. Looking at that as an indicator for need, it really showed that this was a good place for Zayo to deploy Middle Mile. And then finally, Dallas to El Paso. This is completely greenfield, so it's a new build for Zayo. And I believe this route is around 650 miles. And again, we use multiple socioeconomic indicators to determine not so much that the route should be built, but where the route should be built through certain communities and where we are going to deploy those access networks for rural and local ISPs to connect into.
Outstanding. Thank you very much, Mark. Super informative. I think you gave a great snapshot from how things are formulated down to the actual application on how things are actually being implemented. which oftentimes gets lost in the channel of communication. So I appreciate that. What I want to do is kind of jump back in. We do have a few questions that are still here and some others that are popping in. So why don't we go ahead and do that? And of course, Mark, I think you'll probably be a little bit of a star of the show with some of these questions, and Freedom, you as well. So the first question here is again from Vinay Khanna. Thank you very much for your interest here. How much of the fiber build is propelled by government funding, Fed, IR funds, state and local government, broadband funds versus an ROI business opportunity? So I guess trying to get a calibration on the scales, if there were 100%, how much would we say is being funded by the government side of funding versus how much is requiring, independent investment on our partner side?
Yeah, so for all these routes, they have a different amount of Zayo contribution tied to them. So really, we can think about it more as a government subsidized build that would have otherwise not been economically viable for Zayo. And that's important because for the long-term support of these residential communities and for companies like Peak, it has to be economically viable for long-term maintenance and operations. Otherwise, you're building a project that's not sustainable. So that's very important. And I did cover some of these different buckets of money. Like ARPA, BEAD obviously is going to be huge, but happy to follow up on any specific grant opportunities or grant funding opportunities.
Yeah,
we have time later in the call. Yeah,
absolutely. We'd love to kind of dig into that a little bit longer. So with that, so the next question I think would be directed to Freedom. Freedom, any tips on how to deal, and it's coming from Linda Satry, I believe you would pronounce it. Any tips on how to deal with local rural EDAs and county IT managers who are tasked to make IT decisions for their constituents, often without much understanding if the tech aspects, much understanding of the tech aspects of connectivity? So I guess a little help with how to navigate some of the local politics and local players based on your experience.
Sure, definitely. So basically, being in the community, that helps a lot. So, and other things, what we try to do if you're working on a project, we do involve the state, or not the state, but definitely the city IT people in it. If we know that we are passing a city office or whatnot, we do call them and say, hey, are you guys interested in any of the services that we are going to pass by? I think for Peak, the benefit is we are also involved in the local community, so that helps a lot. So most of our local entities are well aware of Peak and the relation, like most of the services in the cities are using Peak's network. So we already have that relation built for over the past couple of years. But I think the key is keeping them informed and involved. I think that helps. Maybe having a meeting like once in 3 months or 6 months with them, that also helps. We do look into what things each of the city and the county we are working on. If there is a new build or new housing neighborhood going in, we do get those information. We are on their list. So just keeping yourself involved in the community helps a lot. I think that's what we try to do.
Oh, fantastic advice there, Freedom. Next question, going over to Noah, and Noah was called out by name here. So Noah, it says, when Noah says, if we can't serve a particular area, we can hand it off to our peers, in quotes. Who are the peers that you're talking about? And keeping in mind, I want everybody to be aware, we have certain NDA obligations that we need to uphold. But maybe from a 30,000 foot or generalities, Noah might be able to share some information with us.
Certainly. And yeah, I can't name drop any carriers in particular or content providers, but in generalities, all tier 1 ISPs and large content providers is how I'm going to summarize that. If you want particular information, please feel free to reach out to me direct. As long as we have an NDA in place, I would have the liberty to disclose, but for the purposes of this, that's where I have to leave it.
No, understood. I mean, I think, going a little bit into what Noah's saying, you can imagine everyone else who's in a tier 1 environment, right? And I know some of the water gets a little murky when you start to get to some of the top tier 2s and lower tiered 1s, but those who are solidly, in a CADA ranking, right? Specifically in the upper echelon, like Zayo, you could imagine those would be your usual peering subjects, as well as, your larger content eyeball type of folks who are pushing mass amounts of content. Those are the folks that you would consider and think of from a Zayo peering perspective. And as Noah mentioned, feel free to reach out. We're all available independently outside of this panel as well. Next question. And, this is something that may be readily available, and Preetam, you may not know this information based on your day-to-day, but one of the questions that came in again from one of our folks here, Vinay, again, thanks so much, Vinay. In round numbers, what does a typical peak customer pay for a gigabit Ethernet internet service?
It depends on which area they are. If it's but typically is between $65 to $100, depending on which territory they are.
Sounds like a good deal. I'll be waiting for you to come to New Jersey.
Yeah, our price is very competitive.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Another question here is, what would be the best way to find the appropriate local ISPs to be able to build to the FTTH build? So I guess maybe that's a Mark and or Preetam question there, right? And again, to restate, what would be the best way to find the appropriate local ISPs to be able to build to the FTTH builds?
I can take a first swing at that. So I think there's two elements to that question. One is identifying the ISPs, of which there's a lot of tools out there to determine coverage and who in that area is providing that coverage. So the FCC mapping tools, if you just Google FCC broadband map, that will be available to you. And as well as all of the state broadband maps that were funded under the BEAD planning dollars. Each state put out their own broadband map, which is a little bit of a better indicator for local ISP coverage within the state. But then the second element of that is also who would be a good partner. And Xavier touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's working with someone without having to change their business model. So if that ISP is looking to expand into an area, but it just hasn't been economically viable over the last 1 to 5 years, then that would be a partner that would be interesting because they already have the boots on the ground. They understand the community needs. And also one thing we haven't touched on today is the community anchor institutes. They would be keyed in with many of those hospitals, schools, large companies in the area that do require the internet connectivity. So working with someone who truly is local, I think is a benefit to both the organization like Zayo, but also more importantly to the residents of that community.
No, thanks very much. And as we push up on time, we're couldn't have drawn this out better. We're right up against our closing conclusion comments. And so what I'd like to do is to ask Xavier, maybe if you had something to take away from this discussion, something you'd like to leave the broader audience with, we'd like you to share that in a minute or so.
Yeah, thanks, Nice. I think there's really 3 key points I want to highlight. Number 1 is Zayo is a tier 1 ISP. We've touched on that, but it's a really important point. Number 2 is Zayo owns and operates the vast majority of its network, and we keep investing significantly in our long haul and metro routes. And then third, we want to partner with you, local ISPs, rural ISPs, and have the resources to provide creative solutions to meet your needs and to help you earn the grant funds that you're after to enable your communities.
Great, thanks so much. I mean, and even beyond the carrier communities, right? We're here for the financial communities, for the insurance communities, for the media and commerce communities. I think to look at Zayo as sort of a one-trick pony or a carrier of carrier services. Yes, that's certainly true. That's where we cut our teeth. But I think over the years, we've evolved by listening to our customers to be able to really expand into certain genres and verticals that people wouldn't necessarily have historically thought Zayo to be a player in. Next up, Mark, would you like to leave maybe a closing comment with the group?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the opportunity. I would say if you are lucky enough to already have a dedicated Zayo sales team, like in Nias's group, I would reach out to them if you want to learn more about the Zayo bead strategy and how we might be co-applicants on future opportunities together. If you're not already working with Zayo, I believe there's links on our website where you can reach out and put a request in. So my final thought would be reach out, and would love to speak more with everyone.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And you know, our esteemed guest of honor gets to close out our panel takeaway here. And so what I'll do is, you know, Preetam, maybe if you could share a closing thought with the group, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Sure. So I think building a future-proof, reliable network is the key, and the reliable is the key word for here. Redundancy is not optional anymore, right? It's not just providing internet; it's providing a reliable internet or service to the customers. And the other thing that we all should focus on is cyber security. As you guys are seeing, even in the bead, there is a section for cybersecurity and other things. So I think a reliable network and cybersecurity, I think, are the two key ingredients for success for any ISP going forward.
Great. Well, thanks so much. Listen, with the last 5 seconds, I'll say, you know, I wanted to thank everyone for coming today. We know time is the one resource that you cannot replicate. We appreciate my esteemed thanks to our panelists. You represented yourselves and your organizations and your groups with greatness today, which is what I think we all aspire to get up in the morning and do. There is no shortage of challenges in this world. Turn on the news, step out your front door. But hopefully we can come away from this conversation today realizing that there are solutions to those challenges out there as well. And we here at Zayo would love to be your partner in helping you find and solve for those. On behalf of myself and everyone else here at Zayo, we want to thank you very much for your time. We want to wish you the best, happy and healthy remainder of the week. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us or email me personally at nias.battle@zayo.com. Thanks once again and have a fantastic day.